Welcome, everyone. We will be starting shortly. A warm welcome, everyone, to this special session with Thomas Hübl to answer questions about his new upcoming course, The Ancestral Healing Journey. My name is Dr. Laura Calderón de la Barca, and you may recognize me as one of the hosts from the Collective Trauma Summit. I'm happy to be here hosting this event today. A few quick technical announcements before we get started. Closed captions are available for this event. For those of you joining us on Zoom with a computer, you can turn on closed captions by clicking the Show Captions CC button found at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you don't see it, click More, then you'll find the CC button there. If you're joining us on Zoom with your mobile device, closed captions should automatically appear. And if not, mobile users can tap Settings, then tap Meeting, and then you can toggle closed captioning to on. If you are finding us on YouTube, the closed captions cannot be turned off. If you have technical issues or questions, please email our support team at onlinecoursesupport@thomashubl.com, and we will put that email address in the chat for you. Those of you who are here with us on the Zoom call can submit a written question at any time by clicking on the Q&A button found at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you don't see it, select More, and you'll find the Q&A button there. We recently completed the 4th annual Collective Trauma Summit, which had nearly 100,000 participants from over 120 countries. After the summit, many people were interested in coming together with a group to explore healing ancestral trauma and collective trauma. And so Thomas has created a new 5-month course. This is the first time this course has ever been held. In just a minute, Thomas will answer questions you may have about our upcoming Ancestral Healing Journey course that starts in just 5 days, on Sunday, November 20th. There is already an amazing community forming for the program. At any time during this call, you can find out more by visiting the website ancestralhealingjourney.com, and we will put that link in the chat for you also. The Ancestral Healing Journey is a 5-month online intensive that includes over 20 hours of live online sessions with Thomas, a member-only online community, a private website, and also includes more than 12 hours of interactive online mentor sessions. Additionally, we are thrilled to have 4 guest speakers, Bayo Kamalafi, Efunyaki, and Isabelle Mansui, and an additional speaker to be added soon, who will each contribute to our exploration of these topics. And when you register now, you will also receive a discount. You can look at the emails we've been sending about the course to get your discount link. For those of you who are new to Thomas and his work, here's a brief introduction. Thomas Hübl is a teacher, a speaker, author of the book Healing Collective Trauma, a process for integrating our intergenerational and cultural wounds, and the founder of the Academy of Inner Science. His lifelong work integrates the core insights of the great wisdom traditions and mysticism with the newest discoveries of science. For the last 20 years, he has been leading large-scale events and courses that focus on healing and integrating trauma. With his wife, Yehudit Sasportas, Thomas founded the NGO The Pocket Project, which works to support the healing of collective trauma throughout the world. A very warm welcome to you, my dear Thomas.
Thank you, Laura. Great to see you.
Thank you, same here. So let's dive right into the session today by taking some of the questions that the community has submitted in advance. And the first question, Thomas, is Why is healing ancestral trauma overlooked or not talked about when doing personal work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, first of all, in many indigenous or mystical wisdom traditions, like ancestral work and being connected to our ancestors is very much part of life and of our healing movement. And I think especially also in the West, like we professionalized in a way individual therapies, all kinds of modalities, and that became more and more widespread. But it's easy sometimes to mix individuation, like that we are all individuals, whatever that means, that is an individual is always connected to the whole, like to the culture, to the society. We are coming out of that cultural stream, and sometimes, especially when we carry a certain amount of trauma or some trauma or ancestral trauma, it might feel like an individual is kind of a separate particle more than part of a stream. And I believe we're like right now in the world, even if there's a lot of, painful things that are happening, there's also a liquefaction happening. Some things become more fluid, some things become more open, old structures start to either fall apart or melt, and our consciousness is kind of expanding. And that expansion means that the ancestral stream, when for example, when we feel our body, where we can feel our body well, where there's streaming, it's pleasant, it's kind of an inner flow, it's lovely and I can feel my aliveness. That is integrated ancestry. Because let's face it, none of us developed or invented a body or a liver or complex emotions or most of the thoughts that we think. Somebody thought before us already. That's not that genius. It's like, yeah, every generation adds something to the beauty of human intelligence, also to the pain of human intelligence. But many of the things that we are, many of the parts that we are and the things that we do in life have been done before. So we are sitting in a long root system of life refining itself until today we have this conversation. And I think when we think of ancestry, it seems sometimes, oh, these are just the people that were before us. It's also our root system into the planet. And we see with climate change how important it is that we are rooted as the planet, because of getting all the feedback loops and updates and change processes that we need. And that's why I think opening the container, like seeing an individual as a kind of a hub of consciousness, where our ancestors, have play a big role. They're actually encoded in us. And so we can learn to, I often say we have this individual, ancestral, and collective part of our nervous system. And we can open up to the experience of our ancestral encodedness and see that also even our attachment processes are, however they are results of the lives and the traumatizations of our parents and their parents and their parents. So it's not that one is separate from the other, they are all one system. That trauma is a systemic, it's a web. It's not just an individual experience. And I think in the right way, if we open the container to ancestral healing, we actually also open ourselves to a much bigger stream of resources. Our ancestors are also resourcing, because we are also not the first ones that got hurt. Many generations got hurt, and many generations also had modalities to heal themselves. We're also not the first ones to talk about healing. And So all that intelligence, when we talk about the self-healing mechanism of the body, we are talking about millions of years of life developing a self-healing mechanism through generations and generations and generations of living. And I think that the hypnosis that we have in a hyper individualized world, that we loosen that up a bit and we touch again the interconnectedness or interdependence of the flow of life. I think that's a very healthy expansion of our awareness, and a very needed one if we want to deal with whatever we are facing right now in the world. And so that's why I think also for every therapeutic modality, opening the space to the ancestral healing means that we include more and more information that is useful for the healing process. And actually, I think some of the things we can only heal when we do individual and ancestral and maybe collective work all together. So that's a bit of a short answer to a very complex question.
Right. Thank you, Thomas. And, this last part of your answer actually leads into the next question that we have, which has to do with, the moment that we're living right now. How does past ancestral trauma influence current events such as wars, the climate crisis, racial divides, and other traumas?
I think on the one hand, we need to see ancestral healing is a way to create intimacy. And pain is a way to create distance. Like pain creates often distancing, absencing, hyperactivation, and healing creates intimacy. So in a way, ancestral work is a way to develop a deeper relation to our ancestors' lives. And sometimes, we see that many of our ancestors, when we come together in a group, they are not at peace with each other. They are not in a state of peace. So that has been handed over to us. So that lands in our life as preformed, predetermined tensions that are in the society. And so our capacity to deal with the current dynamics in our society need also, there are many ways to deal with this. There's a contemporary way in 2022, but part of it is also healing the rifts and the absences and the victimization, or let's say the traumatization, but also the perpetration. And that's not so easy, because it means that I need to develop a relationship to the transgressions of my ancestors. And that's often challenging. But denying it and turning away from it will inevitably end up in some repetition compulsion, because what stays unconscious becomes our destiny. What we bring into our awareness will have a new choice. So instead of being against what my ancestors did, I can actually develop a relation and have a new choice and choose another life, another way of doing things. And I think that's the more mature way to do it. So either I can deny it and keep it unconscious, or I say, yes, I'll find a relation, and it matures me as a human being. I need kind of an inner work, but also inner ethical upgrade. And that is evolution. That's how we evolve as human beings. Because trauma integration is also post-traumatic learning. Everything we integrate expands our perspective. And ultimately, we call that wisdom. Because the more of life I can include in my perspective, in the way I live, I make decisions, I relate to life, I'm a citizen in our society, I'm a husband, a wife, father, mother, I live a more sustainable life, and I'm also more including a wider aspect of life in the way I live. And I think that creates global intimacy also. That is a wise way of living. And that also means that many of our wars, I also often say the fact that we didn't do ancestral and collective trauma work in Europe, for example, in the last 30, 40 years, as a result, there's a new war. And because that massive traumatization doesn't just disappear over the generations. The opposite, it's being passed on, and it creates a lot of individual symptoms. It creates a lot of societal symptoms. And that's why I often say we are the ones that can bring back awareness into the ancestral flow. And instead of denying it, because it's difficult to look at, we find titrated ways to include our ancestral lives, so to have access to the resources and to be able to be a transformational hub for the things that were difficult. And I believe that increases our capacity to be present, that increases our capacity of compassion, love, and very importantly, it opens up the future more. I believe the healing work we do means we hand over more resources to the next generation. And we see right now how important it is that we hand over, that we do our work in order to open up the future for the next generations. And one thing I said already, so the conflicts that are in our ancestry, if that's racism around the world, the after effects of colonialism, if that's gender violence, if that's genocides, if that's Holocaust and the Second World War or First World War, whatever it was around the world, this is our purpose. Is not just what's our career. Our purpose, I believe, is to integrate the package that every one of us got of the unresolved life, and to contribute something meaningful according to our intelligence. And both is purpose. So I'm not just doing the healing work to get to my purpose. Doing my healing work is already part of my purpose. That's not separate from it, because usually these two get split as if they were two things. But they're actually one lifetime, one purpose in life. So yeah, and I think that will inevitably also help to reduce the amount of polarization, the amount of wars, conflicts, like all the things that we are struggling with, up to climate change. I think it's a big remedy for climate change to do our ancestral work, because it's our roots. And sometimes we say, yeah, embodiment is how I feel in my body and how grounded I feel through my body. That's right. First of all, we don't feel what we don't feel in our body. So when we feel our body, we say, yeah, but I feel my body. So yes. And I've seen decades of groups where only when the anesthesia fades and we feel a new part of life, we become aware of what was absent for such a long time. And so that grounding is an individual process. It's an ancestral process. So when we do our ancestral healing work, we also feel more grounded in Earth, in the planet, in our lives, but in a deeper place. And when we do our collective work, it even goes deeper. So it's part of bringing, in a way, spirit into connection with our soil and our earth, and to develop more presence in our life.
That's beautiful, Thomas. And so, when I hear you, I'd be really interested in hearing, how does this translate then into the course? What makes this course and your approach unique and different? And how does it differ from previous courses you've done in the past? How does this become, what you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's multiple things. In every course we have a different center of gravity. There are similar principles, of course, but we focus our time. So this time we focus our 5 months deeply onto ancestral healing with all its subtopics. There are many subtopics, from immigration to biracial or multiracial backgrounds and how they live in us, how we have enough space and time to really deeply create a sensing connection, because it's not about intellectual knowledge of, some of us might know a lot about the ancestors, some of us might not know much about our ancestors, but that's also not the point. We are going to look to create a sensing relation, a felt relation through our embodiment with our ancestors, and that needs practice. That also means that through ancestral work, we activate our relation to our ancestors. It's like when you take somebody out for a dinner, you invite the person, you bring an impulse into life, and then you get a response back. So if you don't deal with our ancestors, they're of course there, but activating that relation has an answer, has a response. And so we do that, and we have enough space to deepen and to go deeper step by step and look at many different sub aspects. We will do live process work in the course, so that it's not just theory about it. We will learn stuff, we will have knowledge, of course, but a lot of applied knowledge. And when I work with somebody, we can see different aspects of how ancestral healing works, like when it's happening. And the other part, I think, is also important, that everybody who feels called to, like the community that is already gathering for the course, is like we as a community, we bring a lot of intelligence together. That's not participating in a course, at least in my understanding, is not being a passive recipient of knowledge. It's being an active participant, which means every one of us brings a lot of intelligence into the course. And of course, there's learning, because we're looking at some specific competencies, but just our presence, our attunement, our ancestors. Like we are sitting here with thousands of people, because if everybody brings some of their ancestors into the room, we are a huge community. And that in itself is a power. So what I often speak about is that there is no separate individual. There's an individual that is an expression of the whole. And this presencing of a group of individual healing, and individual healing rippling out into the group, that's an interdependent, infinite system. And that's why I believe that these specific containers now about ancestral healing have their unique capacity. And so all together is a special field that we are in over 5 months. And as I said, we are not just looking at intellectual understanding, we are looking at inner movements and inner transformation that starts by us exploring ancestral healing in many different forms, of course. And so I think that's an amazing container to explore in and be supported by. Like that energy field is also a support for us for 5 months. And it's not just the individual transmissions, like the sessions we have. Like for 5 months, we are also in a field together that brings up insights and new understandings, so when we go to work or when we do whatever we do in between the sessions. And that's exciting. That's a real healing field.
Thank you, Thomas. And I'd like to go back to something you said and to really spell it out, because we have received a number of people are asking, is the course suitable for them, given that they either know already some things about their ancestors, and it might be, the horrors of World War II, or on the other hand, they have no clue, they have no connection, or they have been adopted. Is that an issue for participating in the course?
No, that's exactly what I said. Like, I believe, what does trauma do? Trauma fragments the narrative. So they're missing intellectual pieces, maybe they're missing emotional pieces, they're missing physical internal awareness parts, so that we can't feel ourselves in our body. There are maybe ancestral fragmentations in our ancestry, that certain ancestors didn't talk to each other. There was a lot of trauma, there was a lot of attachment trauma in various ways, or there are repetitive cycles of addiction, of suicidality, there are many things, mental health or physical health issues that keep repeating themselves in an ancestral transmission. And so um, when we do that work, that fragmentation consists out of internal defense mechanisms, like absencing, for example, distancing, disembodiment, over-mentalization, and many other things. So when we notice, oh, I don't know much, that is already the process. It's not that that's wrong, we should know something, or if I know much, then that's the beginning of my process. But we are always starting exactly where we are. And sometimes, for example, feeling nothing is a very intelligent function. Or not having a memory of something is an intelligent function, not a dysfunction. It performs something in us. And usually when we respect where we are in the process and we don't pathologize it, oh, I should be more embodied. No, why? Maybe in your life, disembodying yourself was the best how you could care for yourself and you didn't have other care. So why is that? That's not a bad thing. That was a very important function. And now is obviously the time that we can look at it and find a different relation. And when we honor those internal things that feel like they are not functional or I can't do that, we find out what's the intelligence behind it. And in that moment, already change is happening. And so that's why I think every one of us starts at a certain place, and that for every one of us that has a special composition, and that's exactly what we want to explore. Also, as you said, when we know that I had many people in my groups that were connected to in Germany to are descendants of SS officers and people that were connected to the workings of the Third Reich, and it's not always easy, and it's a very important process to develop a relationship in the right pacing. And we will also talk in the course a lot about resourcing and pacing and how we respect and not, we are not here to break something open. We want to work with the intelligence of the nervous system, of our body, of our ancestral body, that when the right conditions are being created, like safety, relational connections, collective presencing, grounding, then slowly the nervous system will release the relevant information anyway, because we all have a self-healing mechanism that we are part of. Self-healing mechanism is not just in us, it's in the fabric of life. The collective system has a self-healing mechanism. Nature has a self-healing mechanism. The planet wants to heal. It's much bigger than individual. That's not just something that my body does. That's what the collective body does. If we take care of the inhibitions of self-healing in the right way. And that precision, I believe, is love. So ultimately, it's a love declaration to our ancestors. And some of our ancestors, it's very easy to speak, like to internally have that love declaration being explicit. And for some of us, or with some ancestors, it's difficult. And that's also part of our journey and then that it enables us to really choose different ethics, different ways of living, and that we can become a sustainable part of a different kind of society than the one that we don't want to look at.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. And that also connects to to a couple of questions. One is a live question from Deb, who's on the call. It says, what level of self-regulation attunement do you feel is necessary for participants of this new course? And that also connects to that some people are worried that they will get triggered and they wonder if they are stable enough to take the course. What would you say to people.
Yeah, if somebody is too worried about participating in the course, then maybe it's good to look either to write to us or say, okay, maybe it's not the right time for now. But usually we are coming into this course not because we know everything or we have done everything before, otherwise we wouldn't need this course. So if there is an attraction, so there's usually also a learning process that's happening through being part of that community. So it doesn't mean that I need to know all the self-regulation techniques, I need to be all the time stable, because things will come up and sometimes we will feel our triggers, and that's part of the process, because we are looking at a whole spectrum of our past. And as we said, also our ancestors are not just, there's not just the trauma in our ancestors, there's also the whole resourcing that our ancestors for thousands of years went through hardship, difficulties, great moments, and healing moments, and traumatizing moments, and healing moments. So that's part of our journey, and that's encoded in our bodies too. So ancestral healing work is not just looking at the trauma, it's also unleashing the resourcing potential and the power that is in our ancestors, and that supports us from the back in a way to walk our life and expand our potential in the world. So I would say it's both. If I feel really it might be too overwhelming for me, then maybe it's good to wait. But if the fact that we don't have all the skills and we are going into something new, that's also part of it, and that's also why we're doing a course. And there will be a lot of learning of resourcing, regulation practices. So we definitely, that's a big part of the course as well. And maybe also, to look at what's my relational environment, to have friends, to have practice partners, to have like people that I can talk about this, or maybe many of potential participants will also have a therapist available if something is new, or be in a therapy already. So there are many factors like that I think can inform that decision. And sometimes we just need to exchange and have somebody listen to us, and it helps us to digest our process.
Thanks, Thomas. And there's also a question around how do we discern what in our personal experience is individual versus collective versus ancestral trauma? And another related question is, how much will this journey be a personal healing process for one's own family system and ancestral line?
No, it's always going to be an individual healing process, like that's already built in, and also family systems. I've seen many times that when people did this work, or also the ancestral work, that family systems start to move. Like people that were estranged, didn't talk to each other for 30 years, suddenly came back into connection and started to talk and develop relationships. So stagnations in family systems often, it's like I often say, like ancestral healing work is like plumbing. So when we open the pipe systems, it's a data flow. Like there's a lot of information flowing to us from our ancestry. And sometimes that information stream is hurt. And that looks in our life as individual difficulties, issues that we are dealing with, health issues, whatever, relational issues. But it's actually a contracted data flow. And when we open that in our ancestry, then it starts to inform us in a different way. And so it's also always going to be an individual expansion. That's for sure. It's always going to impact our family systems. We have many participants in our groups where people came into the trainings, and then the next training, their parents were here, family members were here, because there's a movement in the family system that starts a healing process. So that's very powerful. And what is true is that we also, part of developing a competence is that we learn to discern, like, and that's part of the why we also do the course. There's not just a simple answer, that we understand, okay, there are processes that are individual, then there are processes that are ancestral, and then there are processes that are connected to the collective dimension. And the skill building is like creating a discernment. Because as much as it's helpful to do collective work, if I project my individual pain onto the collective and I want to deal with it there, I'll get stuck. It's like a bypass. So then we need some competence building that what needs to be taken care of. And that's what I would call, like, that's kind of the inner melting and fitness training of our entire nervous system, so that I can feel, okay, this is a personal process. This is ancestral process and ancestral attunement. Because I think also for many therapists, facilitators, coaches, like mediators, people who work with people every day, like being ancestrally informed and open and being able to hold that space for our clients is an amazing enrichment. And it doesn't mean that the therapy work is not going to happen, but it's happening in a bigger container. That is, I believe, very important, because sometimes individual processes can be healed to a certain extent and then they get stuck. Then we open the map, we bring in more information that will liquefy those processes further in the individual experience, because they're not separate. And so that's actually an amazing, I believe, an amazing attunement tool. And the art, of course, is that the thinking and the sensing are connected, which is called sense making. And then different processes make sense because I can intellectually understand them. I can be attuned through my heart and my body. And I become a resonance body for other people, or also in myself, for my ancestors. And that resonance body grows, which means it will affect my whole life, because everybody that I meet, I walk in a deeper presence. And so I think that discernment is important, but there are not just a few words that can say how that works. Through our integration, we will develop the sensing capacity to be able to answer that question. So that question is actually a process, like it's an ongoing process and refinement question. And how does our nervous system learn? It learns through integration, because if something is shut down or held, I can't train that part, because I sometimes even don't know that that lives in me, because it's unconscious. So like bringing like plumbing in and opening that part up is integration work. And then I can train the open part of the nervous system to become much more refined, be much more attuned, so that the resolution of life grows through contemplative practices and training. We can increase our sensing awareness by a lot. So I think these two together, training and integration, are an amazing couple when we want to grow in life.
Thanks, Thomas. And that leads into the next question also. This is from Christina, who is on the call, and she asks, can you speak more about the process of integration? How do we recognize it happening within us as we do this work?
Yeah, I often say there are 3 stages to integration. The first is, or 4. The first is that I'm completely unaware that that's part of my life. The second is that I, through my life or through my exploration, I become aware of something. When I become aware of something, for example, for example, my relation to my grandfather, when I tune in with it, is distant. There's a distance. And so I become aware. So I start to reflect. Reflection and attunement lead to digestion, which means, oh, I see the distancing towards my grandfather is actually built into my perception. So that distancing is a function, not a fact. That's a function that's built into my experience. It's a process. Distancing is an active process, not that there is a distance. It's something it's a process in my nervous system. In the moment I re-own it, let's say I re-own it, and then I feel, I don't know, I feel the fear that's connected to that. I feel all kinds of things that are connected to that. There's a digestion phase. And then I feel that in my relation to that grandfather, that's now a simplified example, that the distance is getting closer, and I feel in my body that certain parts of my body start to feel more close to me. So my grandfather is also encoded in my body. So when my relationship to my grandfather heals, I can be more in. So where I was distant from my grandfather, I was also distant to parts of myself, emotional parts, maybe cognitive parts, and physical parts. Healing that distancing or that absencing brings the resources of my grandfather back to me, and it also, I feel more grounded in my life now. And then I will see it in how I experience the world. I will also feel a change. So when something integrates, we can always feel like an additional flow of information and a relaxation, or we can say a deeper grounding, a deeper arrival in this life, and an upward movement. That's the vertical development. So horizontally to my grandfather, something integrates. There's a deeper grounding, which means now I feel more ancestral intimacy. And there is an upward movement, which is my creative energy that goes out into the world. So I feel more empowered to participate, I have more social agency or creativity, and also the standing to bring that creativity into the world. So that's how I grow. And then every time we feel integration, like our life expands. When there's real integration happening, my inner world gets bigger. The world can land more in me. And the world gets bigger. And I believe the scarcity, to dispel the scarcity in our world, it needs us to do the healing work that creates the scarcity in the first place.
Inspiring vision of integration, Thomas. And it also speaks to the resources that we need to deal with those transgressions that have happened. And there's also a question that says, can we make peace with our ancestors even if they were responsible for a great deal of harm?
Yes, that's a good question. It depends how important it is to us. And when we say, can we make peace with our ancestors, it doesn't mean that we agree to their decisions or their action, with their decisions or their actions. It means that I'm willing to find my own relation to their choices and actions in life. Because if I deny it, I'm actually also denying a part of myself. I'm suppressing a part of myself. And so that suppression creates a stagnation in my life. If I say, okay, even if it's not easy, what is not easy? Not easy means sensations come up in me. So when I relate to an ancestor that committed some transgressions or crimes or whatever, human rights violations, that when I allow myself to feel into that, I will feel something. First of all, I feel something. And the first question is if I'm willing to feel what I feel. And if it's too difficult for myself, I can also say, oh, I need to do this with other people. I need to do this with a therapist, or I need to do it somehow in a context that helps me to go there. We don't need to do it always alone, and or on our own, because that's already maybe part of the trauma dynamic, that we do too many things alone. And then, so the more I explore how I feel in relation to that ancestor, I go through a maturation process, because it needs something from me. I go through a learning process. And the more I go through the learning process, the stagnation or distance, which is stuck, it's called stagnation. Why is stagnation? Because it's fixated relation. Will start to regain its pulsing. And that doesn't mean that I made that choice that my ancestors made, and that it's my fault that I did, because some people mix that up. It means that I find a relation, a dynamic relation, which is a pulsing relation versus like a stagnation. And that pulsing relation develops more maturity and learning that my ancestor didn't have. And that internal learning grows my perspective and grows my way to interact, how I interact with the world. And that is the change process. So by me being willing to face the difficult emotions, the shame that comes up in me, the fear that comes up, maybe the anger that comes up, the sadness, the grief, because it means that I'll feel more of that past. But that's also needed if we want to change. We don't change by keeping the past out and just trying to look towards the future. That past will always find us somewhere. Denied history will always find us somewhere. But if we stop denying history, so we find the unintegrated history, because we could say integrated history is not the past. It's sitting here having this moment. Unintegrated history is the past, and somebody needs to turn around. And if it's not us, then somebody in the next generations. Somebody will need to look. And seeing and sensing is presence. And presencing the past means that we are willing to onboard what was hurt or what was not integrated into the present moment. And I think that's how we simply grow as human beings. And even more so, I think once we understand that ethical development works through de-icing the past and harvesting the ethical corrections, like we need to restore something ethically, and that restoration is actually the consciousness that we need in order to deal with current innovations. Like, well, if you want to deal with artificial intelligence, if you want to deal with nanotechnology, genetic engineering, all kinds of science breakthroughs that are happening, we need to match that technological and scientific advancement with the right consciousness and ethical level. But if part of our ethics are frozen in the ancestry or in the collective trauma, we can't match it. And that difference, like that gap, is the beginning of a potential re-traumatization. So in a way, it's actually, it's part of our calling. It calls us anyway all the time. And listening to that call, I think, is a deep commitment to our humanity. Because progress is not just technological progress. That's part of it, and that's also very important. But progress is that we as human beings really outgrow ourselves and open up a world for our children to move into that is wider, bigger, more compassionate, more loving, more sustainable, and creates a responsible ground, a soil, because we are the soil. We are the soil. We are the land that our children and their children are sprouting on. And in a way, embodiment can be seen as how I'm feeling my body. But healing the traumas in our body means we are healing the land. Our body is the land, and if the less we live in our bodies, the more we fight over land outside. The more we live in our bodies, we are able to negotiate the way we live on the land. And I think all around the world, there was a lot of fighting over external land, when in fact what we really need is to re-own the internal land. Because our bodies are planet, our bodies are soil. We are the soil that our children and their children are growing on. So that's when the soil is fertile. That's what it means, transgenerational responsibility. The ability to respond to future generations and to the former generations. That is a flow.
Beautiful, Thomas, and it leads to, probably the last question that we'll have time for today. But you've spoken about, the three rights to be, to belong, and to become, and it feels like the belonging aspect really can have a profound impact here. And actually, there's questions here about belonging to a family, a lineage, and being able to feel that. Also, if someone's adopted, and being able to feel the belonging, being disconnected to parts of oneself. Mm-hmm. And finally, also, as one is doing this healing work, is it normal to experience resistance from people around us, like family members and friends? So there's an aspect of belonging that feels really important. So what would you say to us?
It's beautiful, belonging, because belonging means that the living system is open towards, like, ancestral belonging means I'm part of a lineage. And it's also part of home. We feel home. But also many people who have migration or immigration histories, like in their lineage, which many places around the world do, some more, some less, but that migration or immigration into another place, and let alone the future that it's going to come with climate change migration, or people that needed to flee and were refugees, needed to leave everything behind and start all over again. And many family streams have that in their past. That's like a very, that hurts our belonging, because it is like ancestral trauma in our lineage. And then it has effects how we feel now. And what it means feel now is how much we can be today in a resonant relation with our life, because sometimes we can be in our life, but we need to either hold on to something or neglect or push away something else. But that's also that we can't really belong, because we compensate on the absence of belonging through other things, or through addictions, or through technology, or there are many things that fill that hole of not belonging. And so belonging to the ancestral lineage also means that I feel a certain level of stability and resourcing in my life. That's I can just be here. And the more I can be here, because it's part of my home, my sense, my internal home. And then wherever I live in the world, I will not only be able to create like a home for myself or for my family, like home will radiate. If I run a business, whatever I do, if I'm part of a team, some people have that magic of just people feel home around them. And especially people who do facilitation work. If I carry a scarcity in my own base, like I will bring this to every group I do. If I feel more at home, people will feel more at home, more safe, more grounded, and that will allow things to come up. And the other thing is also with adoption is that, of course, there's the trauma of the separation from our biological parents, but the healing is restoring the inner order of adoptive parents, biological parents, ancestry, that the more we see the beauty of adopting children as a service to life, as a giving process, there's a beauty to that process. And if we can honor the biological parents as adoptive parents, then we actually stand in their line and we are in service of that line. That's a beautiful part of our life. But if there's disrespect, or if there is kind of we stay part of the separation, then it will create all kinds of side effects in that family. And so I have seen many people like developing a deeper and deeper belonging through that healing work, and that's vertical belonging. Also, the energy that like what runs through our spine is like a vertical pillar, and that goes back into our ancestry and to a potential future. And so when we ground ourselves deeper in healing also the broken belonging, because if certain parts of our family, people didn't talk to each other, they had severe conflicts, they disliked each other, the pipe system is leaking. The pipe system is leaking, or sometimes even stuck. And that lives today somewhere in us too. That's not just gone. And so getting to know our ancestry is getting to know a part of us that is crucial. Like it expands the way we live in life. And I think it deeply expands our resilience. Like feeling again part of a lineage, that's also resilience. And it improves the way we relate to people today and what kind of atmosphere we bring. Because often immigration and the after effect of families that immigrated to countries, there's so much trauma that might have been before, that might have happened in the country where people immigrated to, and then the first generation or second generation difficulties or processes that happen. That in itself is a very delicate process that often comes with a lot of hardship or suppression of feelings because it wasn't possible, because we needed to make it. And I think we have to restore that in order to live our life fuller. And then it's also one last thing that is also interesting, because I'm talking a bit of the sub aspects of what we want to look at, is that when we come from a certain family situation or socioeconomic situation and we upgrade in our life, so we become more successful in what we do and we change the quality of our life, then there is a gap between our ancestors and how our ancestors lived our life and how we are living. That needs some attention, because if we don't give it enough attention, that will come often as a feeling of I can lose again everything, it's not stable, I need to work hard, I need to exhaust myself to keep that standard. And these arguments in our mind make a lot of sense maybe, but in fact, it's actually a gap that is filled with absence of fear, and that we integrate our own growth in our life with our ancestors. And it's like a healing process, so that our current level becomes sustainable, becomes like a state. And then we can also much more enjoy our life because it's integrated into the flow. And that's actually how initiation and manifestation, the two principles of developing more conscious awareness, work in the deeper mystical traditions. So that's a very powerful process too. So as you see, and I just mentioned a few, there are many different applications, like how we can apply in practical ways ancestral healing.
Thank you so much, Thomas. This has been a wonderful and rich session. And that's all the time that we've had for today. So before we go and before, let's just take a moment to feel just the richness of what you've shared with us and what lies before us in the course. So thank you, Thomas. Now, let me share a few important details about our upcoming course. To get all the information, you can visit the website ancestralhealingjourney.com. This is going to be a deep and transformative journey with over 20 hours of live online sessions with Thomas, 4 guest speakers, a members-only online community, a private course portal, plus 12 hours of live mentor sessions where you can meet with other students in small breakout groups. And we understand that it's not always possible to join the live online sessions, or you may want to revisit the content. So the sessions are all recorded and posted for downloadable lifetime access. The course also includes several bonuses, such as a recorded course with Thomas with 6 modules on the foundational teachings in collective trauma, 11 talks from the Collective Trauma Summit, a 4-part series of core teachings from Thomas on cultivating presence and awareness, and 2 guided meditations. All of these bonuses are available immediately when you register, so you can start exploring and you'll have lifetime access to return to the content in the future. I am greatly looking forward to being part of the team who will be supporting the course with you, Thomas, and I would invite anyone listening to join us if you feel called. Again, you can join us by registering on the website ancestralhealingjourney.com for only a few more days, because we will be beginning the course this Sunday, November 20th, and it will continue through April of next year. When you register in the next few days, you will receive a discount on the course tuition, and you can pay in full or choose the payment plan. And thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing many of you in the Ancestral Healing Journey course.